Okay. Hello, everyone. Today we'll begin our sixth session of business research method. Today's topic will be qualitative research, data collection, and the materials, especially the group presentation, have been uploaded on YouTube. So hopefully all of you have watched the video recording and have given comments and questions to the presenter. I think we can begin to the Q&A session. For group 2, you may read the question and where is the question from, and then the answer for that question. And if you want to show some material, you may do a share screen to explain your answer.
Okay, so we're from group 2. Group 2 will start answering the question. So the first question comes from Sabine that asks regarding the observation part. So there are 4 parts of observation, and our group are asked to give example situation for each option. So our answer is that the observation method have 4 parts, as I mentioned in the presentation. The first one is complete observer. The second one is observer as participant. The third one is participant as observer, and the fourth one is complete participant. So the example, the complete observer itself is the researchers does not take part in the social setting at all. So they only do the observation with their identity is unknown. The example is that the researchers attend political campaign rallies to observe patterns in the crowd behaviors. So in this case, people are unaware of the researchers' presence, but the researchers are doing the observation towards their behavior. That is for the complete observer. For the second one is observer as participant. In this case, there is some interaction with the participant, but the interaction is limited. So the researcher's aim is to play a natural role as much as possible. It is the example is that it basically happen to the condition when the researchers only want to observe the activity with the researchers identify is revealed, but with only limited amount of interaction. And for the third one is participant as observer. Here, the participant is fully engaged with the participant. So the participant itself is more like a friend or colleague than a natural third party. While there is full interaction with the participant, they still know that this is researcher. So the example is that we as a researcher attend basketball session and games to observe how new players become part of the team. So in this case, student and staff are informed about the researcher's identity and presence. So the participants are informed regarding this researcher. And for the fourth one or the last part is complete participant. This is like anonymous researcher. So the observer fully engaged with the participant and partakes in their activity, but the participant is there itself is not aware about that. Aware that observation and research is being conducted, even though they fully interact with the researcher. So the example is that researcher pretends to be a marijuana user, so observe how marijuana uses and how marijuana dealers develop trust when both are engaging in illegal behaviors. So that is the example of 4 types of observation. Sabine, is that answering your question?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay. So I'd like to add that there are obviously more than one types of observation, and each one differs in terms of the, how do I say, the immersiveness of the observation. Basically, we want the observation to get as natural setting as possible, and for the first 2 observations, sometimes it's not possible to get a completely natural setting, because people might change or modify their behavior when they perceive themselves as being observed. But if the observer can blend in, can join in as part of the participant, then the hopefully the observation gets to be more natural. And this happens, I think one of the most famous example is of one anthropologist who wants to observe the behavior of a tribe in the deep in the deep areas of Papua. She wants to observe the behavior of the chieftain and the people of that tribe. And to get the natural observation, she married the chieftain, not pretend, but really married the chieftain, and become part of the tribe, part of the society within the tribe. And for she married the chieftain for a couple of years, and then during that time she really gets the natural interaction of the people in that tribe, as opposed as being a foreigner that only comes for a short amount of time and then take pictures or even ask question. And uh, with with the second part, with the the foreign observer, the outside observer, the the subject, the tribe might not exhibit the full natural behavior that they exhibit to the insider, to the the participant observer. Okay, move on to the next question.
Okay, so I'm going to answer Alex's question from group 4. And your question was regarding my statement, and you ask for qualitative study, will there be multiple interviews on the subject? But I think there's a bit misunderstanding about my statement and your question, because it's a different aspect, but that's okay. I'm going to try answer your question and also set straight my statement. So to answering your question, I think it all depends on what you're doing, and there is no rule on depending the number of interviews that you conduct. Some interviews may give you the little data, while others may provide a rich insight. And we should keep in mind that more interviews does not mean that you have a more rigorous study. And for all I know, the factors that can influence how many interviews a researcher may conduct depends on the type of sampling technique or the size of the pool of potential interviewees, and also maybe the resourcing of the study. So the researcher itself can place limitations on what sampling is feasible. And to set straight about my statement, so the point was I'm trying to differentiate the data analysis in qualitative and quantitative research. So in quantitative research, the data analysis process is have more clear or rigid structure. Like the first step is to collect the data, analyze the information, and finally writes the report. Meanwhile, in qualitative, the steps is more flexible, and the researcher could proceed hand in hand with other parts of developing the qualitative study. For examples, while doing interviews, the researcher could like niche some parts, like analyzing the previous interview collected, or writing memos, or organizing or doing revision of the structure of the final report. I think that's it for me. Does that answering your question?
Okay.
Thank you. It's pretty clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'd like to add something about so yes, for qualitative studies, especially for interviews or observation, it's important to unpack the analysis, unpack the data as soon as possible. So sometimes when we do the interview, the first time, we get a lot of ideas coming, a lot of interpretation that comes along with the response from the interviewee. And that's very important. And we need to capture that first initial unpacking of the data. Because if we wait until, let's say, a week or 2 weeks after the interview, we will lose a lot of that insight that comes when we are doing the interview. So we want the data to be analyzed as fresh as possible. Don't wait unpack the interview as soon as you finish the interview. But then you can analyze your initial analysis. So it's so important to document your first thought and then analyze those first thought to identify potential biases or potential shortcoming that might make you misinterpret the data. But at least you've got that initial insight that you can work on later. Okay, move on to the third question.
Okay, I'm going to answer Zafira's question from group 7. And her question was, could you elaborate more about necessary in the 8 steps informing codes? And unfortunately, in the books, there is no further explanation. So I'm going to answer based on my findings about recoding. So for all I know, sometimes the data that includes all the details aren't clear enough for analysis. Even sometimes the exact opposite can be true. Like data that are convenient to collect often don't include the details that we want when we analyze them. And so we could use recoding as a technique that allows us to combine 2 or more categories of variable in order to simplify the process of analysis. Simplify as in helps us create tables that are easier to read or identify patterns in responses, or enables us to group continuous data into categories so that we don't present our readers with an excessively long table. Is that answering your question, Zafira?
Yes, thank you, Yusha.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think I have no other things to add. Move on to the next question.
So for the next question is from Ahmad Farhan. He asked regarding the data collection type. Out of 4 types that we have mentioned in the presentation, which are the methods that most effective in gathering information, qualitative information? So based from our opinion regarding the comparison of 4 methods in collecting data, our opinion is that interview are probably the most effective in gathering information. And besides interview are probably the approach most used to collect data in studies. Why we choose interview as the most effective in gathering information? Because in interview, it is particularly useful in uncovering the story behind the participant experiences, belief, motivations of individual participant, and also efficient in gathering more information from the experts that we have interviewed. And also interview questions are usually open-ended questions, so that in-depth information will be collected directly from the people that we have interviewed. So that's why we choose the interview method as the most effective way, because we can also do the interaction and observation with the person we have interviewed. So Farhan, is that answering your question?
Yes, thank you.
I'd like to add something here, that there are a lot of different methods of data collection in qualitative study. We have interviews, observation, secondary data, and etc. And which is the most effective? Actually, there's no single method of data collection that's effective for every situation. So yes, in some cases, interviews are the most effective, but on other occasion, other situation, observation is better, and on another situation, secondary data is better. So the correct answer is that there are no single method that's effective for all situation, and the best practice is actually to combine multiple methods. So one of the criteria of being open in qualitative research is being open to different methods. So it's better for you to not stick to one method. For example, I only want to do interviews, and if I want to do qualitative study, I will choose only interview. That's not a good practice. The best practice is to combine, to identify which method is the best for the context. For example, if the if the topic is sensitive and people might lie or might not telling the truth about the situation because of the sensitivity of the topic, interview is actually not the best one, because it's very how do I say it? If you want to ask sensitive topics, and people will might answer to get to make them look good, but not the actual truth. And for those, I think observation or even secondary data might be better compared to interviews. And so that's why the best one is actually combining between interviews and observation, uh, to get a holistic view of the phenomenon, rather than just getting the 1 hour or 2 hour interview result and then coding the result. Okay, the next question.
Now I'm going to answer the last question. Her question is, what does it mean by natural settings in qualitative research? So qualitative research is a multi-method in focus involving an interpretative naturalistic approach to its subject matter. So this means that qualitative researchers study things in their natural settings, attempting to make sense of or interpret phenomena in terms of meanings people bring to them. So qualitative research involves the study, use, and collection of a variety of empirical materials such as case study, personal experience, introspective, life story, interview, observational, historical, interactional, and visual text. So that describes routine and problematic moments and meanings in individuals' life. So does that answer your question, Dila?
Yes, Saya. Thank you so much.
Okay. Yeah. In general, qualitative studies are considered much more naturalistic compared to quantitative studies such as surveys and experiment. Why? Because in survey, we collect the answer. So in survey, the phenomenon must be simplified to be able to be measured by the questionnaire. So in measuring the variable, in measuring the phenomenon with the questionnaire, actually the researcher simplifies the phenomenon in a way that might not be natural. And for experiment, it's even more unnatural, because in experiment, the researcher needs to manipulate the independent variable. That's absolutely not natural. In a natural setting, the observer, the researcher, have as little as possible influence toward the data. We want to capture the data with as little as possible influence from the researcher. In interviews, actually, for certain observation, it can be very natural, but in interviews, it also depends on the expertise of the interviewer. For expert interviewer, they can condition the interviewee to elicit their response in as natural response as possible. I think we have two more questions from group 1 and group 3. So have you got the question from group 1 and group 3?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
I tried to answer one.
Okay.
So group one asked regarding coding process, which coding category is the most optimal and efficient to record the data? So since coding is not actually to record the data, but to analyze the data, coding is the process of organizing the data by bracketing or writing to represent a category of the data. So I think the most optimal or efficient way to categorize it would be depending on the data that is collected itself. If it is already self-explanatory, then it wouldn't need,
codes that are unusual or surprising. But if it is, if the data itself is, you know, not what it expected, not what the researcher expected to find, then they would need to make the coding in a certain way that reflect that data.
Okay, yeah.
Okay,
So
thank you, Alisa.
okay, so for coding, it actually, yeah, it's not part of the data collection. It's part of the data analysis for qualitative study, but it's also very important. And I think the best practice here is the one presented by Miles and Huberman. So there are two waves of coding. The first wave is the open coding. So we want to code according to the data as we go through the data, and it's usually before we do the coding we read the transcript over and over, perhaps even more than 10 times before we can begin the open coding. So open coding, we identify interesting themes, interesting bits, and we want to associate the text from the raw data, from the transcript, with the code, with the insight that we want to classify, but with no consideration of theory. So the first pass, the first wave, we code the data without regarding the theory. Then on the second wave, we recode the open coding, or we classify the open coding, we structure them into a hierarchical structure, or a relationship structure based on theory. That's the axial coding. So that's the I think that's the common practice in coding the qualitative research. If you want to do qualitative research, you've collected the interview, you want to analyze the data, one of the best way is to do the two-step coding. The first step is the open coding with regardless of theory, data-driven, very data-driven. And for the second pass, you will recode the open codes using theoretical framework and so forth. Okay, the last question.
Okay, thank you very much, sir.
Last question from group 3.
And for the last question by Rafid, I'm going to answer. So
Okay.
your question is about the strength and weaknesses of quantitative and qualitative research. So basically for quantitative research, their strength is their findings can be generalized if selection process is well designed and sample is representative of study population, and they are relatively easy to analyze, and the data can be very consistent, precise, and reliable. However, they have some limitations also, such as related secondary data is sometimes not available, or accessing available data is difficult or impossible. And then sometimes it is difficult to understand the context of a phenomenon. And also the data may not be robust enough to explain complex issues. And for the qualitative research, their strength is they are the complement and refined quantitative data, and they also provide more detailed information to explain complex issues. They also usually they are more cost efficient, and their limitation is their findings usually cannot be generalized to the study population or community, and they also are more difficult to analyze, and their data collection is usually more time consuming. Is that answering your question, Rafid?
Yeah. Okay. So for quantitative and qualitative, both have their own pros and cons. And I think last week I've mentioned that the best approach is not is actually combining between qualitative and quantitative. I think today we will discuss about the four types of mixing between qualitative and quantitative, and that's also an important part. So there's a middle ground, which is the mixed method. We use both quantitative and qualitative to answer the question, because qualitative and quantitative, they answer the different types, different parts of the question. So sometimes if we rely only on qualitative or if we rely only on quantitative, we cannot get the full picture. We cannot get the holistic answer. We only get one part of the answer that can only be answered by the methods either qualitative or quantitative. Okay, thank you very much for group 2. Please give applause for group 2. Okay, so before I move on to my materials, so next week will be group 6 presenting the topic material about sampling technique. However, next week is a holiday, a cuti bersama. I think that's so there will be no classes next week, but I'm moving the entire session to asynchronous distance learning. So for next week, there will be no Zoom session like this, but group 6 will have to record a 45-minute presentation as usual, and which will be uploaded to YouTube. And so the Q&A will be conducted purely through the YouTube comments. So for each group, each group must ask one question in the YouTube comments, identify your group, and also group 6 will answer the question through the comment section. You can ask for more than one question if your group member have more than one question. Please ask as many questions as you like, and group 6 will answer the question, and I will mark you more for more questions actually, because it shows your ability to answer the question, to understand the topic being presented. Other than group 6, the progress presenter, group 4 and group 7, will also need to record a 10-minute presentation. And this presentation needs to be sent to me by Monday. So by Monday, group 4 and group 7 will have to send me a 10-minute presentation of their progress on the sampling method. And I will add my response to the presentation. So, and I will merge the progress and my comment with a 30-minute record of the lecture. So I will, even though there will be no Zoom session, I will record a 30-minute lecture on the additional material and combine it and upload it on YouTube. And finally, last but not least, there will be an online quiz for next week for the material given in week 1 to week 7. So according to the syllabus, there will be one quiz before the midterm, and the quiz will be multiple choice, and you can do the quiz anytime within the given period. So I think you can see the given period on AMAS. So the online quiz will be done on the AMAS platform. You can do it anytime within the period, but the time limit will be 30 minutes for 20 multiple choice question. Okay, for this slide, is there any question you'd like to ask about the presentation or the quiz for group 6, group 4, and group 7? Have you understood the instruction?
Yes. So the quiz will be conducted on the same day as the, as the class, like
Okay.
Wednesday.
Okay, so it will be open. So I will open the quiz for the entire week. So you can do the quiz for the entire week, but you can do it anytime you like. You can do it like on Monday, on no. I think so I will open the quiz after I uploaded the materials on AMAS. So I'll have to wait for the presentation from group 6, 4, and 7. But then the materials will be, the quiz will be done throughout the week. So you can do it on Tuesday or Wednesday, or even on in the middle of the night. That's completely fine.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sir, the quiz will be done through MAS, right?
Yes, that's right.
I'm not enrolled in the class yet because
Really?
I just joined. Yeah.
Okay. I think I've mentioned. Okay, I've there is an enrollment code. So you need to enroll. You need to enroll, and I'll give you the enrollment. Are you in the WhatsApp group?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I'll send the enrollment group, the enrollment key on the WhatsApp group. I think, but it's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or something. It's very simple. Okay, but you're supposed to be already enrolled in MAS. Okay. So after this, you can enroll with the key. Okay, is there
Okay,
any
sir.
other
Thank you.
student that have not been enrolled on MAS? Because MAS is our main platform, so all of the lecture recording of the material will be from the presentation, from the recording that's available on MAS. Okay, any other question for next week? Okay, if not, I'll move on to week 8 and 9. So week 8 and 9 will be after the midterm, and it will be so Bapak Arga will do the session, but as usual, we want to move the presentation of asynchronously. So each group must record a 15 to 20 minutes presentation of the research proposal. So the presentation will be recorded, and there will be 4 groups presenting each week, randomized by the tutor. So I will ask the tutor to randomize the 4 groups. So there will be 4 groups presenting for week 8, and there will be 4 groups presenting for week 9. And Bapak Arga will give the feedback and also approve the proposal for the final assignment. So your proposal will be implemented for your final assignment. Okay. Is there any other question for week 8 and week 9? Okay. If there's no question, I'll move on to the material. So for the qualitative research data collection, this material is from Cooper's chapter 8 and chapter 9. I've summarized the important bits of the chapters. So basically, there are multiple data collection techniques. We have group interviews, in-depth interviews, focus group. We have observation and so forth. Okay. One of the difference between in-depth interview and a focus group interview is the different. So even though both have similar approach, but actually they address different parts, different type of question. So for individual interview, it usually aims to explore the individuals in depth. So individual variables that's not related with interaction with other people. So for example, motivation, personality, satisfaction, those are appropriate to be explored with individual interviews. But for assessing group interaction or interaction within an institution like culture, formality, power and relationship, those kind of variable, those are better to be collected using a focus group discussion. Okay, and okay, I think it's already explained by the presenter. There are three types of interview formats. We have the unstructured, semi-structured, and structured. So basically, the characteristic of the interviews are different for each type. For the structured interview, it's very standardized, so it's almost similar to a questionnaire. So there's a very strict guideline that must be adhered. So the way the questions are asked must be standardized. There should be limited variation in the responses, and it will be like an open-ended question in a questionnaire. It's used in a developed area of research, so it's not as exploratory as the other two types of interview. So if it's perhaps less exploratory, and it can be used, and the benefit is that it's efficient, it's consistent, and it can be compared across respondents. So if we want our interview result to be compared, to be able to be compared across respondent, then it's better to use structured interview. However, if the understanding of the phenomenon is still lacking, we are unable to develop a standardized guideline to ask question, then we can use either the semi-structured or the unstructured interview. So in the unstructured interview, there are no guidelines, no interview guidelines. So it's free expression. You can ask question however you like. But for the unstructured interview, the interviewer needs to be expert. So if you are an early, if you are an early level interviewer, you just a beginner level interviewer, you shouldn't try to use unstructured interview. You should start from structured interview. But if you are experienced at doing interview, you can start asking the question, doing the interview with no structured guideline. And the benefit, it helps to develop understanding of the phenomenon, sometimes beyond what is known through the literature review, through what is known by the researcher. So unstructured interview collects the most new insight compared with structured and semi-structured interview, because there's no boundary, there's no specific guideline that might limit the data collection. For the third type, the semi-structured interview, it's flexible. It's in between structured and unstructured. So it's also good for beginner level interviewer. So for beginner level that's already tried structured interview, they can try semi-structured interview. Okay. Okay. If you're doing the interview, it's very important to structure your question accordingly. Start from broad issues. Start from the least sensitive issue. So you want your interviewee to be relaxed. You want them to answer the easy questions first, the easy broad questions first. So you put the narrow one, you put the difficult question at the end, at the very end of the interview. So you don't want to start with difficult question, but you want to begin with easy, broad question and starts to narrow down, and then ask the difficult and specific question at the end. Okay. Okay. So this is also true with questionnaire. You want to structure the easy question at the beginning and put the difficult question, the sensitive question like income and so forth at the end of the survey. Okay. What's important if in interviews, and what's I think the strength of interviews is that you can do a probing. If you're doing a a survey, you can put open-ended question in your questionnaire, and you probably get similar response as a structured interview. But if you're doing a structured interview, you're allowed to do some probing, which is not available through open-ended questionnaire. So basically, probing elaborate on a specific subject based on the answer. And sometimes we want to get as much information without injecting too much of the interviewer. So sometimes by being silent, just by being silent will motivate the interviewee to answer, to fill in the silence. But if the silent probe doesn't work, then you can try the echo probe, which repeating what is said and ask for more. But this is after you've tried the silent probe. Or you can simply you can make the interviewee more relaxed by just showing that you are listening, like okay, I see, that's right, that makes sense. So those simple word can sort of encourage the interviewee to tell more about the topic. And also we can directly ask them to tell us more. How do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? So if you have a specific element that you want to probe, for example, you want to know whether a specific marketing program works, but you cannot ask from the beginning. You begin by asking what have you noticed about the marketing campaign by this brand. But you have a particular campaign that you want to ask, but you want it to come up naturally from the interviewee. But if after giving them time to say, they didn't mention the thing that you want to probe, then you can ask the uh, the interviewee what you want to ask specifically. So it's called the phase assertion, to reveal what we know and ask them to elaborate specifically about that particular topic that we want to probe. Okay, and this is also another detail. We sit and wait. We take the last statement and turn it into a question. So this is also a good hint how to probe for more answer from the respondent. Okay, I think I'll skip this. The second method of data collection is observation. So it's observing someone carefully, and it needs to be systematic. So observation can be scientific, but it can be unscientific. For an observation to be scientific, it must be conducted specifically to answer a research question. So there's a purpose for the observation. It must be systematically planned and executed, and use proper control. Control here means that, for example, we want to capture all of the variations of. So we want to, if we want to observe the behavior of customers of a certain restaurant or cafe, then we need to observe them at periodically at a certain time period, for example, for every 2 hours, for every 1 hour, and then throughout the week. So if we observe only on the weekend, we fail to get what's occurring during the weekdays. And if we only observe during the weekdays, we fail to get what is happening during the weekends. And also providing a valid and reliable account. So for example, we record the observation and we analyze the data based on that recording. I think that is considered a valid and reliable account. Okay, this is the methods wheel. So in the qualitative research, it's divided into communication and observation. If for communication, this is for example interviews or open-ended questionnaire. It's a research that collects data using communication by asking questions. I think this is also in the research design. So either a communication design or an observation design. As for observation design, it doesn't need any communication. It's minimal interaction between sometimes it use minimal interaction between the observer and the object of the subject of the observation. But there's also an overlap. Some observation also include a degree of communication, like participative observation, in which the behavioral data needs to be interpreted. Then we can ask a question. Okay. Okay, I think this has been explained, that observation can be divided into behavioral and non-behavioral observation. For behavioral, it's what is seen, what can be observed directly, either non-verbal like gesture or facial expression. But it can be linguistic, what is said, what is recorded. For example, if you go to Facebook or Twitter, what's being said about, let's say, about a certain celebrity on YouTube, on Twitter, on Facebook, those are linguistic observation. And then there's also extra linguistic, which is like the different way we for example, sarcasm. Sarcasm is an extra linguistic, so it's not what is literally said, but sometimes there's a hidden meaning behind the words, and that's also interesting to be observed. And there's also spatial observation, which observe the activity within a given space. So for example, if we observe the interaction of people in a cafe, okay, how the layout of the cafe interacts with the human aspect and create the specific interaction. For example, the layout of cafes before the pandemic and after the pandemic, it changed. There's a shield, a plastic shield that creates a safe distance between the cashier and the customer, and how does that influence the behavior of the user, of the consumer. That's also an interesting part to be observed. There's also non-behavioral, something that is something that's perhaps it's not about behavior, but it's observable. So what can be recorded, but like, for example, in an activity record, like I think some like attendance list, like electronic attendance list. So some people can, there's a big data on the attendance, or perhaps the way people use MRT or busway. Those are recorded process and activity that can be analyzed separately as an observation. Okay. And currently with the technology, it's not so, it's observer are no longer have to rely only on their eyes or their notes, so that the technology can help in the observation process. However, it needs to have a consent. So we don't want to record a behavior, for example, record an office without the consent of the people inside that office. That's considered illegal activity. So if we want to record, if we want to use the recording of a certain space, for example, if we want to record the Zoom session like this, actually, if I want to use this for my research, I have to get the consent of the people inside the recording, because if there's no consent, then I cannot use that recording for research. And that's the ethical side of it. Okay, so there are a couple of tools that can be used. There are video cameras like CCTV. There's also audio recorder just to capture the audio in a room or in a place. There's a pupillometer, which measures the size of your pupil, which should theoretically reflect the attention. So with higher attention, the pupil will be smaller. But if people doesn't pay attention, the pupil gets bigger. The pupil change size according to whether we focus or not to a given point in the picture or recording. As for and also eye tracking, so it's often used in marketing research when the participants are asked to watch a short video, a short commercial, for example, and then their eyes are being tracked to see the hotspot, which part do they see the most, and which part captures their attention, because attention is the desired objective of the commercial, for example. There's also activity trackers, for example, Fitbits. You can I think there's a tracker for bicycle riding. So those are actually observation data. So the apps collected your data, and sometimes you've already given them consent to use your data for commercial purposes. So sometimes part of the usage of the apps is that you give them consent for a lot of things that you don't realize, including using your data for commercial activities or for research activities. The last but not least is EEG, which is I think it's quite invasive. It's you are asked to do a certain activity, and while you are doing that activity, your brain activity is being scanned, and then the researcher will infer a lot of things based on your brain scan. So I think someone mentioned to me that the EEG is very similar to a lie detector. So I think you can when you ask question and record the brain activity, you can sort of get an idea whether the answer is true or false, or whether the participants are telling the truth or telling lies, based on which part of your brain is active when you are answering the question. So I think this is very invasive, and you need to get the consent of the participant before you do the research. Okay. This is the important part. Okay. So I've mentioned that quantitative and qualitative are complementary, but then the next question is how to merge between qualitative and quantitative. So there are 4 ways of mixing between quantitative and qualitative. The first part is by conducting both studies simultaneously. So we conduct the qualitative and the quantitative separately but simultaneously. While we are doing the interview, we also collect the data through surveys. The second one is ongoing qualitative with multiple waves of quantitative. So for example, we do a one long qualitative study, we do observation, we do participant observation, but while we are doing the long qualitative, we also we are also doing multiple waves of quantitative. We've done, for example, we've done surveys for every month for 3 months. Well, we're doing simultaneously, we're doing a 3-month observation study on, let's say, employees in a company. By merging, by being members of that employee, we collect observation data by interacting with the people in that organization. The third one is quantitative precede qualitative. So quantitative first, we do the quantitative study first, and then we collect the data. We analyze the data. We've got the statistics based on the quantitative, and then we develop a qualitative study to interpret the result from the quantitative. So in this case, the qualitative is done to interpret the result of the quantitative. And the last but not least, I think this is the ideal type of mixed method, which is the sandwich one, the sandwich mixed method, which is qualitative, then quantitative, then qualitative. The first qualitative is done to identify the phenomenon, to get the initial understanding of the phenomenon that we want to study. So we formulate propositions based on the interviews and observation, for example, and then the propositions can be tested using quantitative. So the quantitative in the middle is done to test the propositions developed from the initial qualitative study. And after we've done the quantitative, we've tested the propositions, and the last one is we do another qualitative to interpret the result, the findings from the quantitative. So this is the sandwich mixed method: qualitative, then quantitative, then qualitative. Why not the reverse? Why not quantitative, then qualitative, then quantitative? So the reverse unfortunately doesn't make sense, because in the quantitative, once you've done the qualitative, you interpret the result from the quantitative, you don't need a second qualitative. Sorry, you don't need a second quantitative, which you might have to interpret again. And because the best method to get the best interpretation of the data is using qualitative. So it should be ended by qualitative research. Okay, I think that is all for okay, that's all from my additional topic. Is there any question that you like to ask about the topics? Yes, it will be part of the quiz. Okay. Any question before we move on to the breakout room? Okay, so we'll move on to the breakout room. As usual, you can discuss about your proposal, about your research proposal. I'll give you 30 minutes to discuss, and then we'll end the session after 30 minutes. Wait a second. I'll start from just a second. Okay. Let's see. Okay. I'll move forward first. Okay, I've opened the room. You may join the breakout room. Okay, guys. Okay, so we have closed the breakout session. Okay. Okay, so how was the discussion? Is there any question specifically that you want to ask me about the proposal? Hopefully you've got enough time to discuss and start working on the proposal that you need to present for week 8 and 9 after the midterm. Okay, I think that is all for today's session. We've done the Q&A and also we've done the lecture and last but not least the breakout session. Hopefully you've got some progress for the proposal, and as I've mentioned that next week we will do the asynchronous distance learning, so all of the interaction will done separately. So I think this will be the last session that we do synchronously. So I think thank you for all of your participation in the last 6 session, and I hope you also will participate, will continue participating by giving comments and asking questions for the 7th session. And I also wish for successful quiz and also midterm that is coming next week and the week after. I think that is all for me. Good day. Have a great week. Have a great week. And also next week there will be a long holiday, so have a nice holiday also. Thank you very much. I think that is all from me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you, sir.